Securities offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through CWM, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Carson Partners, a division of CWM, LLC, is a nationwide partnership of advisors. This is The Way to Wealth, with host Scott Ford, a jiu-jitsu fighting, woodworking, beekeeping entrepreneur who is also the managing director, partner, and wealth advisor of Carson Wealth. Financial freedom is the goal, and clarity and simplicity is how we'll get there. Let's get to it. This is Way to Wealth.
And welcome back to the Way to Wealth podcast, where we're all about making money simple, allowing you to focus on living fully and doing that today, not just 30 years from today. Exciting week this week to have Professor Wade Howe on the podcast. I've read Wade Howe's commentary and white papers and books through the years, and was excited to be able to have him on the podcast and share his expertise and all the academic work that he's put out there. So I'll just start by sharing a little bit about his bio, though I know of his work. It's my first time actually meeting him, at least virtually. So he's program director of retirement income certified professional designation and a professor of retirement at American College, as well as co-director of the College Center for Retirement Income, principal and director for McLean Asset Management, and all kinds of papers, as I said, and books and information he's put out specifically around retirement planning, the taxation of retirement planning. So very excited to ask a bunch of questions and see what Wade has to share. So first, thanks for joining the Way to Wealth podcast, Wade.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me, Scott.
Yeah, excited to dig in. He asked about length before we started. I told him typically about 6 hours. We typically went 30 minutes or so. So he was like, that may be a bit long. So no, I didn't, but excited to jump in. And, look, the Way to Wealth, I talked a little bit about this before we jumped on with Wade, and that is what the Way to Wealth, living now, the two's the team, the W's the foundation, making sure that's in place. And then on top of that foundation, how we look at the world is 3 buckets of investing. Whether you're in retirement or not, I think it makes sense to delineate savings and investing, because I believe they're 2 different things. So we do that. So the first bucket we focus on is savings bucket. And for us, we want a minimum of 1 year. Some people want 50% of their portfolio there. That's fine. Everyone's different. What are you comfortable with? The second bucket is income, once we know we have savings taken care of. And for us, we want a minimum of 10 years of income set aside. So if you know you have a year, you know you have 10 years set aside, then we can go for bucket 3, which is the growth bucket. And here we can swing for the fences a little bit, or at least attempt to keep up with inflation. And if I back up to the income bucket, same thing here. Some clients want lifetime income. They want to know the rest of their life. They have a paycheck coming in on a monthly basis. So with that frame, Wayne, I would love to talk a little bit about you talk about retirement income style awareness as a starting point for creating a retirement income strategy. Maybe we can start there. I would love to learn and have you share with the audience a little bit about that.
Sure. And just to move into that topic, it does sound like it's quite aligned with your approach, where when I talk about one of the styles being time segmentation or bucketing, that's a very specific idea of generally not using annuities. It's more thinking of individual bonds for short-term expenses, and then the growth bucket for the longer-term expenses. But you're, I think, framing buckets more generally where, as you said, some people want lifetime income, some people are not looking for lifetime income, and so forth. And so those buckets can accommodate different strategies. And that's what the retirement income style awareness is really about, that there are different approaches to building retirement strategies. And there hasn't really been a clear approach to help individuals, especially individuals not necessarily working with a financial professional, to understand that there are different ways to build a retirement strategy. And my concern is then they become vulnerable to just doing whatever they hear about first, whatever, when they turn on the car radio, the random radio show that they hear or commercial that they hear gives them, all the strategies sound good when they're described, but is it really the right strategy for that individual? And what we found is really the 2 primary factors that can help guide someone towards a strategy are Are they probability based, which means are they comfortable relying on this idea that stock markets will grow and outperform bonds over reasonable periods in retirement? Or are they more safety first? Would they rather have contractual protections to support their core retirement spending need? And then the other factor is this idea of optionality versus commitment. Do they really want to keep their options open as much as possible, to be flexible, to make changes, to not be really locked into anything? Or are they more comfortable committing to a strategy that they know will solve for a lifetime need, that will take that off their to-do list and so forth? And so with these two factors, it really does explain the different retirement strategies out there, where if you're probability-based and optionality-oriented, you're pretty comfortable just relying on an investment portfolio and taking distributions from that throughout retirement. If you're safety first and commitment-oriented, that we call income protection, and that's the traditional idea of building a lifetime income floor with simple types of annuities, income annuities, fixed index annuities with living benefits and so forth, and then investing on top of that for more discretionary goals. Then if you're safety first and optionality oriented, that's where I would consider time segmentation to play a role. The idea of having fixed income bonds for shorter term expenses, stocks for longer term expenses. And then if you're probability based and commitment oriented, we call that risk wrap. And that's more that world of variable annuities with lifetime income benefits, where you can invest for upside, but also you're committing to a strategy and you're protecting yourself from outliving your assets in retirement. And so based on how you score on these factors, it just provides step one of thinking about, how do I want to approach building a retirement income plan?
Yeah, all of that. Wade, you have a paper on, right? The Retirement Income Guidebook. Is that out? Is that what you just articulated? Is that outlined in the guidebook?
Yep, my retirement planning guidebook. It is still that when you search for retirement planning in Amazon, the top organic search term. And yes, chapter 1 of that is on the retirement income styles, because I really come to view that as step 1 of the transition towards retirement, is to first decide on your style or understand your style. How do I want to approach building my retirement income plan? And then from there, you start to do the rest, which is looking at the financials, looking to see, is there a particular gap that you are seeking to fill after Social Security and so forth? And then everything else that goes into a complete retirement plan related to Social Security claiming, Medicare, long-term care, retirement housing decisions, the non-financial aspects of finding a sense of purpose and passion for retirement, tax planning, legacy planning, incapacity planning, and everything else that's part of that retirement planning process. But I view step 1 as the retirement income style awareness, how to think about your style for retirement.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's just recognizing that we are different. So instead of everyone having a X mix in stocks, bonds, and cash, and X as a withdrawal rate, well, maybe, but not everyone's like that. So this just, you're recognizing these different factors of, are you probability based or safety based? Are you, optionality made up, meaning you prefer optionality, or are you more commitment oriented? You're good with making the commitment. And then you even took that and pared it down where they can pair up differently. It's not just probability versus safety. It could be, so it could be probability or optionality. Clearly could be market driven, because you're going to be probably more comfortable in that lane. What if you're probability and commitment based, or safety based and opportunity based? There's just different blends of those 4 elements. So I think that's wise and useful how you frame that.
Yeah, and ultimately, all these different strategies are viable. You have the risk premium from the stock market, you have risk pooling with insurance, and they're both competitive approaches. So it's really about finding the approach that you're most comfortable with as an individual from the different options out there.
I love that. And I am aligned with it. That's not why I love it. I'm aligned with it because I believe it just makes sense, because it's kind of the camp of, some are zealots on both sides, right? I mean, it's just, this is the way, and any type of product is evil. And then there's those on the opposite side where if you're in the market, you're completely gambling, you've lost your mind, you need to say so anyway. And it's like, wait a minute, there's a middle here somewhere. And I think I recognize we're all different. So let's find that middle. And some may fit more on the extremes. Great. That's okay too. Just recognizing we're all different. And at the end of the day, Look, this is being recorded mid-2022, and so volatility is here for all kinds of reasons. And it's just markets like this just really speak to it. Some people really uncomfortable. Well, we just want to make sure you're allocated in such a way that we're thinking about these different factors and different options, so that I call it the sleep factor, where it's like, I know it's volatile. I know there's things moving. I'm allocated in a way that I'm comfortable. I understand what's happening enough where I'm sleeping at night and it's not, being emotionally in distress because of this volatility.
Right. And it's something we learned with this research is this traditional idea of risk tolerance, where someone takes a risk tolerance questionnaire about how comfortable are they with market volatility? Are they going to panic with their stock allocation and so forth? That doesn't really correspond very much at all to the concerns people have for retirement. Primarily, you might think that if you're more risk averse, you have a lower risk tolerance score, that you'd be more worried about outliving your money in retirement. But they're not really related. And so you really need to go beyond a tool like that to address the retirement problem. The risk tolerance questionnaire really is just based on this idea that everyone's going to use investments for retirement, and in a traditional modern portfolio theory asset allocation way. And that's not the only way you can approach things. The retirement income problem is quite different from just saving for retirement.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You also talk about, and I have the book where I have all kinds of books beside me, but that's one of them. I've enjoyed your book, hence one of the reasons to have you on and share this knowledge. So you talk a little bit about the benefits or merits of the different investments, annuities, and different modalities that are out there. I would love to hear a little bit more about you talking about the merits of the different options that are out there for retirement spending.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure. And so in saying that all these different strategies are viable, I think the best way to simply think through it is you could start retirement with bonds. Like, let's just use bonds for retirement. Let's ladder out bonds. If I want to plan for a 30-year retirement, I have a bond maturing each year for the next 30 years. That's not going to support a lot of income, especially in the low interest rate world that we're in now. Interest rates are starting to come up, but still something like the classic 4% rule for retirement doesn't really work with a bond portfolio in this interest rate environment. So ultimately, you have two different ways that you can spend more than with bonds. And this is where, well, they're both viable. Which one do you want to use? The investment-based approaches, let's invest aggressively in the stock market. And it's important for people to understand that the 4% rule, that's kind of the classic of that investment-based approach, says that retirees should never have less than 50% stocks in retirement. It really requires a lot of exposure to the stock market as the only opportunity to earn premiums over what bonds can provide to be able to spend more. Some people are comfortable with that. The other approach is more of a risk pooling or insurance-based approach, which if you think of a simple income annuity, which is this idea of I pay a premium to receive a monthly income for no matter how long I live, the insurance company invests that premium into a bond portfolio, but it's allowed to account for me as an individual. I don't know how long I'm going to live. And so in an investments world or a bond-based world, I have to assume I'll live a long time, whether that's 90, 95, 100, depends how worried I am about outliving my money. But the longer I plan for, the less I can spend. And so with bonds, I can't spend very much. But with the annuity, the insurance company knows some people won't live very long. Some people will live to 100 and beyond, but they can account for, on average, how long will people live. And then they can base the payments more on the average life expectancy. So I'll get to spend like I'm going to live to my mid 80s, no matter how long I do live. And that allows for a higher standard of living than with bonds. That is actually quite competitive with anything the stock market might be able to provide for my retirement. So there really is that flexibility there. Am I more comfortable with the risk premium of the stock market or with risk pooling from insurance? And then I can start to build a retirement strategy around that.
Yeah. And another thought on that is, when you think, so longevity risk is a part of what we're talking about here with how long we're going to live. And there's no one size fits all solution, which is exactly what you're saying. There's different options and benefits thereof in those options. When you think of the longevity risk, however, who benefits from the longevity risk? Well, if you're thinking of an insurance company who are using death benefits, let's say via life insurance, well, they do because they're not having to pay out the death benefit because we're living longer. So using potentially, if you're wanting some guarantees and safety and you're willing to commit to giving up some of that control, they should be, those who are benefiting from that longevity should be able to continue to pay you out because of that, right? So anyway, it just as an option, another reason that it could make sense for certain individuals and something else to think about. What about taxes and tax efficiency in retirement and distribution planning in retirement? There's a lot we could cover there, but yeah, how do you think about that when you're thinking of tax efficiency, and what would people in retirement, what should they be thinking about regarding tax efficiency regarding their distributions?
Mm-hmm. And this is an area that I've really been more focused on in the recent past. A lot of the research you find about what is the safe spending rate in retirement ignores taxes entirely. But as it turns out, you can really enhance the longevity of a retirement plan by approaching it in a more tax efficient manner, which effectively means thinking about tax diversification. I have some funds in a taxable account, some in a tax deferred, like IRA style account, some in a tax exempt Roth style account. Asset location, thinking about where I want my different types of assets, and it's usually more tax efficient, generally stock index fund type approaches for the taxable account, more bonds for the tax deferred account, and then my less tax efficient type emerging market funds and so forth in the Roth account. And then how do I spend from them throughout retirement? And ultimately, we have a progressive tax system in the US that the higher your income, the higher the tax rate you'll pay on the next dollar of income. And then we have all these other non-linearities in the tax code. Things like a dollar of income might uniquely cause me to have to pay more tax on my Social Security benefit. It might cause me to have to pay more Medicare premiums. It might push a dollar of my long-term capital gains into a higher tax rate. It might push some of my earnings or investment income into the 3.8% surtax and so forth. And so how do I start to think about, from a lifetime basis, managing my taxable income in an efficient manner, which may mean generating some additional taxable income in low tax years to help then reduce the need to take as big of distribution in a higher tax year. And that can involve a Roth conversion strategy, moving funds from my tax deferred account into my Roth account, especially before Social Security begins, especially if I'm retired, say in my 60s, to help prepare me for when required minimum distributions begin. I'm not necessarily being pushed into higher tax brackets in ways that I don't want. If the RMD forces me to take out more than I actually want to spend, of course, I can reinvest in my taxable account, but I do have to pay taxes. And I might be pushed into paying taxes at a higher rate than I would have had to had I been planning throughout. And that's what tax efficient retirement strategies are all about. It's sometimes generating more taxable income to pay taxes earlier than necessary, but doing that because you can pay taxes at a lower rate than you'd have to pay in the future. And so thinking strategically about how to do that.
Yeah, so I didn't share that piece, so we're very aligned. That's not completely why I had you on, because I'm very comfortable having guests on that we're not aligned. It's great. Let's just get to the best answer. You and I happen to be very aligned. So the way to wealth, when you look at the foundation, the wealth is an acronym. So W is what's your foundation. So it's tax reduction plan, estate legacy plan, asset protection plan, insurance maximization plan, interest rate credit review, and then cash flow and control. Doing those should create more cash flow and control. Then the E in wealth is established savings. The A is all expenses covered by income. The L is living with inflation. So they're the three buckets: savings, income, and growth. And then the T in the wealth is tax diversification. So tax deferred, taxable, and tax free. And we just say, hey, typically the person with options wins. Are taxes going up or down in the future? Well, certainly I would have a hard time arguing down. However, who knows completely? Having options makes sense. Having taxable, tax deferred, and tax free, just having a diversified allocation there. And then H's have the plan updated annually. So very, when you said that, I'm like, of course, that makes sense. So I totally agree with the tax diversification. When I think of the buckets, some of my favorite vehicles, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about that, and it'll tie to probably your factors and your just your playbook here of how you view the world, or how you view retirement planning or income planning, specifically your income style awareness. So for me, savings I mentioned, income I mentioned, and then growth I mentioned. For the savings vehicle, personally, I love dividend paying whole life. It's not an investment. However, it is savings. And I think it resonates with how I think about it. There's tax advantages, competitive rates, long-term. There's control. I can utilize that money. So whether I'm in retirement, I could tap into that to take it if it's a down year, or if I see an opportunity out there I want to invest in, great. I could take a loan from that and leverage the funds. So utilization and control, I just like it for that piece. And then of course there's savings and CDs and other options clearly in the savings bucket. I would love to hear any thoughts on, let's say specifically, something like dividend paying whole life with a mutual company. In our case, is what we like to do. And I'm a fan of that for the savings buckets. Any thoughts on that, Wade?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've done quite a bit of research in that area and build up case studies around if you're 35 or 40 years old, you hear the refrain like buy term and invest the difference. Should you do that? Or should you think ahead about, well, maybe if I have permanent whole life insurance, might I be able to use that as part of the retirement plan as well? And I became so convinced by that research that I just primarily view my bond allocation as the cash value of a whole life policy. There's a lot of different ways it can be used as part of the retirement plan that I've looked at. And it's simply, if you have a legacy target, that's one option, is now you clearly have targeted assets for legacy. It's the premium is what you're allocating towards the legacy, rather than having to preserve that all from your investments, which just means spending so much less in retirement. Or using the covered asset strategy, which is like with annuities. If you're looking at one, life-only income annuities tend to have the highest payouts because there's no life insurance built into them. You're taking the full risk of, if I get hit by a bus, there's nothing for the beneficiaries. But backing that up through the life insurance can be a way to, as an alternative to building life insurance into the annuity, I could get a single life-only income annuity with the highest payout for the premium amount matching the death benefit from the life insurance. And then just frame in my mind the life insurance death benefit as a replacement asset for that annuity premium. And then there's the idea of the volatility buffer or the buffer asset. And there's really just 3 buffer assets I'm aware of: just cash value of whole life insurance, and the reverse mortgage home equity conversion mortgage, assets held outside the portfolio, not correlated with the portfolio, that can provide temporary spending resources after a market downturn to avoid selling from the portfolio at a loss and to give that portfolio an opportunity to recover. And that is a very effective way to manage. I mean, we didn't get into the sequence risk in retirement, which is about when you're spending from the portfolio, a market downturn can really dig a hole for that portfolio that's harder to recover from. And so using a policy loan from the cash value of whole life insurance can be a temporary bridge to support spending and to protect the portfolio during a market downturn. That can be quite effective in helping to manage that sequence of returns risk.
Yeah. Interesting. You share that you, after doing research, what you did, because I did the same thing. I went down the rabbit hole of Austrian economics, and then, and then how that pairs potentially with dividend paying whole life, specifically with the mutual company. And then after doing that, I'm like, boy, this could make a lot of sense for the bond portion of my portfolio. And that's what I chose to do. And lots of reasons. I'll add one more. You think if it's a mutual company, typically these companies have been around for over 100 years, some 200. So they navigated everything imaginable that you can think of, continue to stay in business, continue to pay a dividend. And one of the benefits they have is this long-term 120-year increments that they're thinking on life expectancy now. And so they're buying things in bulk that we may not have access to, and they're getting premiums each month. So guess what? No matter what's happening in interest rates, they got to redeploy that. So they just have, in my mind, a good capacity to navigate long-term anything that may get thrown at the bond market. And then you can utilize it so well. So it's fascinating that you chose to use that in your portfolio too, as have I. So you mentioned then pairing that potentially. So in our process of Way to Wealth, if you think savings, and you could choose, cash or savings or CDs, or you could choose dividend paying whole life like I have, and then bucket two of income, all kinds of strategies, real estate, ladder bond portfolio you mentioned, all kinds of, you could have a dividend paying portfolio, you could write options off of a stock portfolio, or if you were safety and commitment focused, maybe you would use an lifetime income annuity, getting the biggest payout. It doesn't matter what happens in any market. You got a check coming to your mailbox every month. Guess that's old school, into your account every month. And you're backing it up potentially with, let's say, dividend paying whole life in this case in bucket one. And you've run analysis on this too, as well, as far as what's the effect of some of these various vehicles on an overall plan, correct? I've seen that in some of your papers.
Yeah, I'm always kind of framing it from the perspective of, here's the retirement spending goal you're trying to achieve. And then, because typically I'm testing a relatively conservative spending strategy, usually there'll be money left at the end. And so what type of an approach will help you to probably better meet your spending goal? Plus, the odds are you're going to have more legacy at the end as well. And it's the integrated approach that combines insurance with investments that generally, not 100% of the time in the simulations, but more often than not, like, 2/3 to 75% of the time. Plus, it's in the scenarios where investments don't do as well that the integrated approach is really allowed to shine. It's more like in the small percentage of the time that investments only wins is when the stock market does so amazing in the simulations that, and both strategies still include investments. So maybe you end up with $20 million with investments only, but only $18 million with the integrated approach in those scenarios. But then in other scenarios where the integrated strategy is really shining, it's meeting your spending goals. There's not going to be as much legacy because markets didn't do as well, but it's also helping to support more legacy at a time where each dollar of legacy matters for more. So that integrated approach, incorporating investments with insurance, with annuities, life insurance, and thinking of the insurance more as a bond alternative, not necessarily selling from the stock market to fund that insurance, really can lay this foundation for stronger retirement outcomes.
Yeah. And you've shown it in your white papers, et cetera, right? So we'll put a link to that certainly in the show notes. And, the only thing I would add to that, just because we haven't talked about it, and I just feel compelled to at least add this piece, and I know I'm confident you align with this, and that is, it's the two in Way to West. The way is living now, and the Taoist philosophy of living in harmony with things, and we only have the present moment. So let's use money for today as well. The two's the team. I really want to point this out because you can hear what we're saying as far as, you could use dividend paying whole life. You could use a lifetime annuity, et cetera. The key here is that too, having a team where no one has an axe to grind. So like if someone just sells a product, well, then when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I'm not going to say that's the best idea for everyone. I'm saying it's an option. And I believe Wade's doing the same thing. So I just wanted to point out, and how you design that policy matters. So if you have someone that's just focused on selling an insurance policy, well, guess what? It's probably going to be all death benefit, no riders on the policy to try to beef up the cash value. They're going to try to get sell as much death benefit because they get paid the most. I wanted to point that out to make sure if you're going to go down any of these paths, you're working with someone who understands these things. They can get paid anyway. You charge a fee for planning, investments under management, or paid via any of these products so that there's no axe to grind. It's really what fits you the best, have option to all these modalities, not just fixed to one thing, and then really tailor something to fit you and your family and what you're trying to accomplish. So any thoughts on that? I just wanted to make sure and verbalize that.
Right. No, absolutely. There's many different ways the policies can be designed. And so having a professional who's aligned with this idea of this may be incorporated into the retirement plan so that it's not just for the death benefit, but potentially for how that cash value will be used. And also there could be other options related to long-term care, like an accelerated, you can use the death benefit while still living to pay for eligible long-term care expenses and so forth. So really having the care behind designing that policy for the way that works best for the retirement plan is quite important.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, use mine the same way, share that with clients as well. And then it has tax advantages. So to me, right, there's just lots of ways to handle this retirement income piece of people's lives. And, you've done a lot of thinking and a lot of work and a lot of research and a lot of writing on the subject. So first, thank you for that and putting that out there. A lot of time and efforts went into it, and a lot of people will benefit from it, and wanted to be, have the opportunity to share some of this information that you've put out there. So first of all, thank you for the work you've done and putting that work out into the world. It's needed and helpful to the people who engage with it and read it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Wade, anything else you would want to share with the audience that we didn't talk about or I didn't ask?
Well, there's so many different aspects of retirement, Social Security claiming. I could talk all day about that, and Medicare planning and everything else. But if people are interested in reading more, that retirement planning guidebook was my effort to do the best I could to explain clearly and in an understandable manner all the different aspects of the retirement planning process, so that people can have that knowledge to either if they want to do themselves, or to be able to have better conversations with their financial advisor so that they're collaborating better in that process. That's who the book's designed for.
Wonderful. Well, that, we'll put a link in the show notes to it. I highly recommend it. I have read it. It aligns beautifully to the Way to Wealth. A fan of it and of your work. Thanks for joining. Would love to have you back on, in the future, because I know we just scratched the surface to all the things that you have to share. So thanks again for joining. Again, can have you back on in the future. So thanks everyone for joining the Way to Wealth podcast. We will catch you back on this podcast again next week. Same time, same place. Catch you next week.
The opinions voiced in Way to Wealth with Scott Ford, Managing Director, Partner, and Wealth Advisor of Carson Wealth, are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial, or tax advisor prior to investing. Guests on Way to Wealth are not affiliated with CWM LLC or Cetera Advisor Networks LLC. Legato Family is not affiliated with Cetera Advisor Networks LLC or CWM LLC. Carson Wealth, 19833 Leitersburg Pike, Suite 1, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21742.